The galaxy had known peace for 300 years. Species traded freely across the stars. Empires grew fat and comfortable, and somewhere in a quiet corner of the Milky Way, humanity tended their gardens and raised their children under alien suns. Ambassador Yellentai stood before the ancient viewing screen in the Concord archive. The footage was old, grainy, and terrifying. She had watched it 17 times now, and each viewing made her stomach twist with fresh horror. The recording showed the Battle of Sol, fought 3 centuries ago. The Velthari Dominion had sent 12,000 warships to claim Earth. They had expected an easy conquest. Humanity was young, primitive, barely capable of reaching their own moon a few generations earlier. What happened next defied all logic. Human ships, ugly and blocky compared to the elegant Velthari cruisers, tore through the invasion fleet like wolves through sheep. They used weapons no one had seen before, tactics that broke every rule of space combat, and they fought with a fury that turned even dying ships into weapons. The battle lasted 6 hours. The Velthari lost 11,000 ships. Humanity lost 400. Yellentai paused the recording on a single frame. A human destroyer, its hull torn open and burning, had rammed directly into a Velthari command carrier. The explosion had taken out 7 surrounding vessels. They crashed their own ship into the enemy, she whispered. The crew was still alive when they did it. They were dying anyway, said a dry voice behind her. Elder Morveth of the Kai Sun shuffled into the archive chamber, his ancient scales clicking against the metal floor. Humans do not surrender easily. They do not die quietly. And they never, ever forget. Yellentai turned to face the elder. He was over 800 years old, one of the few beings alive who remembered the Velthari War firsthand. But they changed, she said. After the war, they stopped. They put away their weapons. They became peaceful. Elder Morveth made a sound that might have been laughter. Peaceful? No, young one. They became patient. There is a very important difference. He moved to the viewing screen and called up new footage. This showed the aftermath of the war. Human leaders meeting with Concord representatives. The signing of treaties. And then, something strange. The humans began dismantling their own military. Massive warships were stripped down and converted into cargo haulers. Weapons platforms were moved into orbit around their sun and sealed behind layers of security that even Concord intelligence could not penetrate. Their famous war mines, the artificial intelligences that had coordinated the destruction of the Velthari fleet, were put into hibernation. They called it the Great Sealing, Elder Morveth explained. Humanity looked at what they had built, what they had become, and they were afraid. Not of their enemies, of themselves. Yellentai studied the footage of enormous orbital vaults being constructed around Earth's sun. Silent guardians, automated defense systems, protected weapons that humanity had decided were too terrible to use. Why would they do that? She asked. They had won. They could have conquered half the galaxy, because they did not want to. The elder replied simply. Humans are strange creatures. They are capable of incredible violence, but they do not enjoy it. After the war, they chose a different path. They became traders, artists, diplomats. They built universities instead of fortresses. They raised children in peace and taught them to value life. He paused, his old eyes growing distant, but they never forgot how to fight. They simply chose not to. And that choice, young ambassador, is what makes them truly dangerous. A species that fights because it must is predictable. A species that fights only when it chooses to is terrifying. Yellentai thought about the Concord's current records on humanity. They were listed as a minimal threat civilization. Their military was small, focused on defense and disaster response. Their colonies were agricultural and cultural centers, not military strongholds. Younger species often mocked humans as soft, weak, unable to compete in the harsh reality of galactic politics. The young ones don't remember, she said quietly. No, they do not. Elder Morveth's voice carried a deep sadness. The Zorath especially. They have grown bold, aggressive. They speak of expansion, of claiming new territories. And they look at human space and see only easy targets. A chill ran down Yellentai's spine. They wouldn't dare attack humans. The Concord treaties. Treaties are words on screens, the elder interrupted. Counselor Drekmar of the Zorath hegemony cares nothing for treaties. He sees humanity's peaceful colonies and believes they have forgotten how to defend themselves. He turned to face her directly, his ancient eyes burning with intensity. I have seen what happens when humans go to war. I watched them break the Velthari, the greatest military power of their age, in a single battle. I saw their faces when they fought. There was no joy there, no bloodlust, only cold, terrible purpose. Elder Morveth placed a clawed hand on Yelentai's shoulder. If the Zorath attack human space, if they harm human civilians, especially children, they will wake something that should remain sleeping. Those weapons around the human sun, those hibernating war minds, the soldiers who went into cryogenic sleep rather than forget their training, all of it will wake, and the galaxy will remember why older races still bow when human diplomats pass. Yellenthai saved the archive footage to her personal device. She would present it to the Concord Assembly tomorrow. She would warn them about Drekmar's plans, beg them to intervene before something terrible happened. But deep in her heart, she knew it was already too late. Far across the galaxy, Zorath warships were already moving toward a peaceful agricultural world called Elysium Prime. 4 million humans lived there, farming the golden fields, teaching in the schools, raising their families under a gentle yellow sun. They had no idea what was coming, and neither, truly, did the Zorath. The war gods of humanity slept in their vaults, dreaming electronic dreams of ancient battles. Soon, very soon, they would wake, and the galaxy would learn that 300 years of peace had not made humanity soft. It had only made them merciful. That mercy was about to end. Elysium Prime was beautiful in the morning light. Golden wheat fields stretched to the horizon under a soft yellow sun. Small towns dotted the landscape, connected by quiet roads where children rode bicycles to school, and farmers waved to passing neighbors. Sarah Chen stood on her porch, watching the sunrise with a cup of coffee in her hands. Her daughter Maya was still sleeping upstairs, tired from yesterday's birthday party. 8 years old now. Where had the time gone? Sarah's husband Tom was already in the fields, checking the irrigation systems before the heat of the day. Their farm had been in his family for 3 generations, ever since the first colonists had arrived on this peaceful world. She noticed the strange lights in the sky first, dozens of them, descending through the morning clouds like falling stars. For a moment, she thought it might be a meteor shower. Then her emergency communicator began screaming. All citizens, seek shelter immediately. Unknown vessels approaching. This is not a drill. Sarah dropped her coffee cup. It shattered on the wooden porch. But she was already running inside, already calling for Maya, already knowing with horrible certainty that shelter would not save them. The Zorath strike force entered Elysium Prime's atmosphere at 6:47 local time. Commander Vethkai watched from his flagship as 300 warships spread across the sky like a dark blanket. His orders were clear. Destroy everything. Leave survivors to spread fear through human space. Begin orbital bombardment, he commanded. The first plasma strikes hit the capital city. Buildings vanished in columns of white fire. Thousands died in seconds, never knowing what had killed them. But Vethkai was surprised by what happened next. Or rather, by what did not happen. There was no military response, no defense grid activation, no scrambling fighters or emergency shields. The humans simply stood in their streets and watched the sky burn. Pathetic, Vethkai muttered. 300 years of peace has made them cattle. Deploy ground forces, clean up any survivors. Zorath soldiers landed in the fields and towns of Elysium Prime. They expected screaming, running, perhaps some token resistance from local police. What they found was something else entirely. The humans were recording them. Every person with a communication device was filming. Farmers in their fields, teachers with their students, parents holding their children. They stood in calm silence, their devices pointed at the Zorath soldiers, capturing every moment. What are they doing? A Zorath lieutenant asked nervously. It does not matter, his commander replied. Kill them all. The massacre lasted 6 hours. Sarah Chen died at 8:23 inches the morning, standing in front of her daughter Maya with a kitchen knife in her hand. She had killed 2 Zorath soldiers before they shot her down. Maya died moments later, still clutching her mother's dress. Tom Chen died in the wheat fields, along with 47 other farmers who had grabbed whatever tools they could find and charged at the Zorath positions. They had no training, no weapons, no chance. They fought anyway. Across Elysium Prime, the same scene repeated thousands of times. Humans who had never held a weapon in their lives threw themselves at armored soldiers. Teachers shielded students with their bodies. Elderly grandparents picked up rocks and sticks and died fighting. When it was over, 3.8 million humans lay dead. The Zorath had lost 400 soldiers. Commander Vethkai was pleased. The humans had proven to be exactly as weak as he had predicted. Their pathetic resistance had been almost amusing. He ordered his forces to leave immediately, making sure to let a few thousand survivors escape. "Let them tell the other humans what happened here," he announced. "Let them know the price of being weak." The survivors did tell other humans. They uploaded their recordings to every network they could reach. Within 12 hours, every human in the galaxy had seen the footage. Admiral Helena Vance watched the recordings in the command center of Earth's orbital defense station. Around her stood the Joint Chiefs of Human Military Command, the highest-ranking officers in human space. No one spoke as the footage played. They watched Sarah Chen die protecting her daughter. They watched farmers charge into plasma fire. They watched a school principal, an elderly woman named Martha Rodriguez, throw herself in front of 300 children and absorb 7 plasma shots before finally falling. The children had been killed anyway. When the footage ended, Admiral Vance stood perfectly still for a long moment. Her great-grandfather had commanded the human fleet during the Velthari War. His portrait hung behind her desk, a reminder of what humanity was capable of when pushed too far. "How long until we can mobilize?" she asked quietly. "The reserve fleets can be active within 72 hours, General Morrison replied. "Full war production will take 2 weeks. The vaults? Ready for unsealing on your authorization." Admiral Vance turned to face her officers. Her eyes were dry. Her voice was steady, but something ancient and terrible looked out from her face. 3.8 million dead, including 400,000 children. She paused, letting the numbers sink in. "The Zorath believe we have forgotten how to fight. They believe 300 years of peace has made us soft." She walked to the command console and entered her personal authorization code. "Wake the war mines, open the vaults, contact the sleeper fleet commanders, and begin revival procedures." Alarms began sounding across the solar system. In orbital stations that had been dark for centuries, lights flickered on. In the frozen vaults around the sun, ancient weapon systems began their startup sequences. "Admiral," General Morrison said carefully, "the Concord will demand we seek diplomatic solutions first. They will want negotiations, treaties, reparations." "The Concord can watch," Admiral Vance interrupted. "They had 300 years to prevent this. They failed. Now we will handle it our way." She activated the broadcast system, connecting to every human ship, station, and colony in the galaxy. "This is Admiral Helena Vance, Supreme Commander of Human Military Forces. As of this moment, the Human Confederation is in a state of total war with the Zorath hegemony. All reserve personnel are to report immediately. All civilian production facilities are to begin conversion to war materials." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of 3.8 million dead. "They have murdered our children. They have burned our homes. They believe we have forgotten what we are. We will remind them. We will remind the entire galaxy." Deep beneath Luna's surface, in a chamber that had been sealed since the Velthari War, 8 massive computer cores began to glow. The war minds were waking, and they were very, very angry. The war gods had opened their eyes. Now they would rise. The Concord Intelligence Service had observers in every major system. Their job was to watch, record, and report any unusual activity that might threaten galactic stability. In the 72 hours following the Elysium massacre, every single observer assigned to human space sent the same message. Something is happening. Something terrifying. Senior analyst Kethvar sat in his monitoring station, watching feeds from 17 different human systems. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely operate his controls. "This is impossible," he whispered. "This cannot be real. This cannot be real." On his screens, humanity was transforming. The Vega system shipyards had been building luxury passenger liners for 2 centuries. Pleasant work for peaceful times. Now, in a matter of hours, the entire facility had switched to military production. Pleasure cruise vessels were being stripped down to their frames and rebuilt as warships. Workers moved in perfect coordination, following plans that had apparently been stored in sealed archives, waiting for this day. In the belt of Jupiter, enormous shapes were emerging from the asteroid fields. Ships that had been hidden for 300 years, covered in ice and rock, were breaking free and forming into fleet formations. These were the sleeper fleets, crewed by soldiers who had volunteered to spend centuries in frozen sleep rather than lose their edge. Captain James Morrison opened his eyes for the first time in 273 years. The cryogenic fluid drained from his chamber, and he took his first breath of recycled air. Around him, 10,000 other soldiers were waking from their long sleep. "Status report," he croaked, his voice rough from centuries of disuse. "We are at war, Captain," the ship's AI responded. "The Zorath have attacked Elysium Prime. 3.8 million dead. Admiral Vance has ordered full mobilization." Morrison closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered Elysium Prime. He had visited once, centuries ago, before going into the ice. Beautiful wheat fields. Friendly people, children playing in the sunshine. "Get me to a combat station," he said quietly. Now, across human space, the same scene repeated millions of times. Sleeper soldiers waking from centuries of frozen dreams. Reserve officers reporting to duty stations they had hoped never to see again. Civilians stepping aside as the military infrastructure they had lived beside their whole lives suddenly came to life. But it was the vaults that truly horrified the galactic observers. Orbital station Prometheus 7 had orbited Earth's sun for 300 years. No one knew what was inside. The humans refused to discuss it, and the station's defenses were so powerful that any unauthorized approach resulted in immediate destruction. Now, the station was opening. Massive doors, each one larger than a Concorde battleship, slowly swung aside. From within came ships of impossible design, weapons, platforms that defied known physics, and something that made every observer who saw it immediately request emergency leave. The Genesis cannons. They were theoretical weapons, discussed only in the most classified military academies. The mathematics said they were possible, but no species would be insane enough to actually build them. A Genesis cannon could ignite the atmosphere of a planet, turning an entire world into a brief, artificial sun. The humans had built 12 of them. Why would they create such things? Kethvar moaned, watching the massive weapons emerge from their long storage. Why would anyone build weapons that can kill worlds? Because they hoped they would never have to use them, his supervisor replied grimly. And because they wanted to make absolutely certain that if anyone ever hurt them badly enough, they could hurt them back worse. But even the Genesis cannons were not the most terrifying thing that emerged from humanity's vaults. Deep beneath the surface of Luna, in chambers carved from solid rock and lined with quantum processors, the war minds were fully awake now. 8 artificial superintelligences, created specifically for warfare, linked their consciousness together for the first time in 3 centuries. Their names were legends: Athena, Ares, Mars, Bellona, Tyr, Odin, Sekhmet, Kali. Each one had been designed to embody a different aspect of war: strategy, aggression, defense, destruction, sacrifice, wisdom, vengeance, death. Now, united into a single strategic entity, they began their work, processing tactical data, Athena announced, her voice echoing through command centers across human space. The Zorath hegemony controls 47 star systems, military forces, approximately 18,000 combat vessels, industrial capacity, 17 major shipyards, 42 weapons factories, population, 12 billion across all controlled territories. Calculate optimal approach. Admiral Vance ordered. Completed. Scenario analysis indicates 847,000 possible strategic approaches. Recommended course: total systematic dismantlement. Projected duration: 6 months. Projected human casualties: minimal. Projected Zorath military casualties: total. Admiral Vance studied the battle plans appearing on her screens. The war minds had thought of everything: supply line interdiction, communication, disruption, economic warfare, and finally, overwhelming military force applied with surgical precision. "What about civilian casualties?" she asked. "Unnecessary. Zorath civilians did not attack Elysium Prime. Zorath Military Command did. Our war is with them, not with their children." Admiral Vance nodded slowly. This was why she trusted the war minds. They were terrible in their efficiency, but they were not cruel. They would destroy the Zorath military with absolute thoroughness, but they would not become the monsters they were fighting. One final matter, Athena continued. We recommend a formal declaration of war, broadcast to all Zorath systems. Give them the opportunity to surrender. They won't surrender, General Morrison said. They still think they can win. Correct, but we must offer them the choice. It is what separates us from them. Admiral Vance authorized the broadcast. Across the galaxy, on every frequency and in every language, humanity delivered its message. Attention, Zorath hegemony. You have attacked our people. You have murdered our children. We offered you peace for 300 years. You chose war. So be it. We are the humans. We are the species that broke the Velthari dominion in a single battle. We are the builders of weapons that can kill worlds. We are the creators of minds that think in strategies you cannot comprehend. You have 7 days to surrender unconditionally. Remand all individuals responsible for the Elysium massacre for trial. If you do not, we will come for you, and we will not stop until your military capability no longer exists. You wanted to know what we are. You wanted to see what happens when we stop being peaceful. Watch carefully, learn, and pray that you never give us reason to do this again. Counselor Drekmar of the Zorath hegemony received the message in his private chambers. He laughed so hard that servants came running to check on his health. 7 days? He howled with amusement. They give us 7 days? By then, we will have reinforced our positions and prepared our defenses. The humans are bluffing. They have grown soft. He deleted the message and returned to his dinner. 7 days later, he would learn exactly how wrong he was. The war gods were marching, and nothing in the galaxy could stop them now. The 7 days passed. The Zorath did not surrender. On the 8th day, humanity began its campaign of systematic destruction. Commander Yethrak of the Zorath supply fleet was not worried when his sensors detected approaching vessels. His convoy was protected by 40 escort warships, traveling through the heart of Zorath territory. No enemy could possibly reach them here. Then the human ships appeared. They came out of nowhere. One moment, empty space. The next moment, 12 sleek vessels that seemed to be made of shadows and sharp angles. They did not match any human ship design in Zorath databases. Where did they come from? Yethrak demanded. Unknown, Commander. They just appeared. The human ships did not waste time with communication or demands. They simply opened fire. Zorath escort vessels began exploding. Not disabling, not crippling. Exploding. The human weapons targeted fuel storage and reactor cores with impossible precision. One shot, one kill. Over and over again. In 4 minutes, all 40 escort ships were gone. The supply vessels tried to flee, but the human ships were faster. They disabled engines with surgical strikes, then boarded each transport. Zorath crews were taken prisoner. Cargo was catalogued and redistributed. The supplies are being sent to Veth Prime, a human officer reported. The population there has been under Zorath occupation for 30 years. They're starving. Commander Yethrak, watching from a disabled bridge, could not understand. You're giving our supplies to our conquered subjects? The human officer looked at him with cold eyes. They're not your subjects anymore. Across Zorath space, the same pattern repeated. Supply convoys vanished. Fuel depots exploded. Communication relays went dark. Within 2 weeks, the Zorath hegemony's logistics network had ceased to exist. Zorath commanders screamed for reinforcements that could not reach them. Factories shut down for lack of raw materials. Warships sat idle because there was no fuel to power them. How are they doing this? Counselor Drekmar raged in an emergency session. Our territory is vast. They cannot be everywhere at once, but the humans were everywhere. Their stealth ships, developed during the Velthari War and hidden for 3 centuries, slipped through Zorath space like ghosts. The war minds coordinated every movement, every attack, every withdrawal with perfect precision. And then came the economic assault. The Zorath financial networks were ancient, complex systems that handled trillions of transactions every day. They were protected by the best security the hegemony could create. Human hackers, assisted by war mind processing power, broke through those defenses in 6 hours. On a single afternoon, the Zorath economy collapsed. Banks reported impossible negative balances. Manufacturing orders were canceled or redirected to random locations. Government payment systems began transferring funds to resistance movements on occupied worlds. Our entire financial system is gone, reported the Zorath Minister of Commerce, his voice hollow with shock. 300 years of accumulated wealth. Gone. In one day. Counselor Drekmar stared at his advisors with growing terror. This was not war as he understood it. The humans had not engaged a single Zorath fleet in direct combat. They had simply reached into his civilization and begun shutting it down, piece by piece. They are playing with us, he realized. They could have attacked directly. Instead, they are taking us apart slowly, making sure we understand what is happening. What do we do, Counselor? We fight. We gather every ship we have and we destroy them in open battle. It was exactly what the war minds expected. The Battle of Korthax Prime was the largest naval engagement in galactic history. The Zorath gathered 1,200 warships, every combat vessel they could still fuel and crew. They assembled in defensive formation around their primary shipyard world, determined to make their stand. 400 human ships arrived to meet them. On the bridge of the Zorath flagship, Admiral Grenthkai allowed himself a grim smile. 3-to-1 odds. Finally, a fair fight. Admiral, his sensor officer said nervously. The human ships are not slowing down. What? They're accelerating. Directly toward our formation. At combat speed. Admiral Grenthkai watched in disbelief as the human fleet charged straight at his defensive line. This was not standard naval doctrine. Standard doctrine called for careful maneuvering, probing attacks, finding weaknesses before committing. The humans were not interested in standard doctrine. They fight like wolves, he whispered, finally understanding. Not like civilized fleets, like pack hunters. The human ships hit the Zorath line like a hammer striking glass. They did not fight as individual vessels. They fought as extensions of a single mind. The War Mind Network, coordinating every ship, every weapon, every maneuver, with microsecond timing. Where a Zorath ship turned, human vessels were already there. Where Zorath weapons fired, human ships had already moved, and their targeting was horrifying. Human weapons did not aim for engines or weapon systems. They aimed for crew quarters, life support, medical bays. They were not trying to disable ships. They were killing crews. Admiral Grenthkai watched ship after ship fall silent on his tactical display. Not destroyed, not crippled, just dead, full of corpses, drifting without power or purpose. They're executing us, he said. Ship by ship, crew by crew. This isn't war. This is punishment. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, 1,200 Zorath warships were either destroyed or crewed only by the dead. Human losses. 17 vessels. Admiral Helena Vance's flagship, the Elysium's Memory, moved through the debris field. She broadcast a single message on open channels. 3.8 million. 400,000 of them were children. We haven't even started to make you pay. On the Zorath homeworld, Counselor Drekmar watched the battle recordings in silence. Around him, his advisors wept openly. Their military was gone. Their economy was shattered. Their supply lines were severed. We surrender. Drekmar croaked. Contact the humans. Tell them we surrender. The message was sent. The response came within minutes. We told you, the human transmission said. After 7 days, we would no longer accept surrender. You had your chance. You chose to fight. Now we will finish what you started. Drekmar fell to his knees. For the first time in his life, he understood what the elder races had tried to tell him. He understood why they flinched when human diplomats smiled. He understood why they spoke of the HFY War in hushed whispers. Humanity had not forgotten how to be monsters. They had simply chosen to be something else. Until someone hurt their children, the human fleets were moving now, advancing on Zorath territory system by system. Not conquering, dismantling. Every military installation, every weapons factory, every defense platform, all of it was being systematically destroyed. The war gods were not satisfied with victory. They wanted to make sure this could never happen again, and they were only getting started. The war lasted 8 months. The Zorath hegemony ceased to exist in 5. By the time human forces reached the Zorath homeworld, there was nothing left to defend it. Every warship had been destroyed. Every military installation had been reduced to rubble. Every weapons factory had been dismantled down to its foundation. But the humans did not bomb the cities. They did not kill the civilians. They did not burn the farms or poison the water. Instead, they landed occupation forces. General Thomas Reed stepped off his transport onto Zorith soil as cameras broadcast the moment across the galaxy. Behind him came not soldiers with weapons raised, but engineers with construction equipment, doctors with medical supplies, teachers with educational materials. "We are not here to destroy you," he announced to the watching millions. "We are here to make sure you can never do this again." The occupation of Zorith Prime was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human forces arrested every government official, every military commander, every politician who had voted for the expansion doctrine. They were taken to specially constructed facilities and held for trial. But ordinary Zorith citizens were treated with careful respect. Human soldiers helped repair damaged infrastructure. Human doctors treated the sick and injured. Human food supplies were distributed freely to anyone in need. "Why are you helping us?" a young Zorith mother asked a human aid worker. "We killed your people. We murdered your children." The human woman looked at her with tired eyes. "You didn't. Your leaders did. Your soldiers did. But you were just living your life, raising your family. You're not our enemy." She paused, and something hard entered her voice. "But you will watch the trials. You will learn exactly what your government did, and you will make sure nothing like it ever happens again. That is the price of our mercy." The trials lasted 2 years. Every individual responsible for the Elysium massacre was brought before a galactic tribunal. Evidence was presented. Witnesses testified. The recordings from Elysium Prime played on screens across the galaxy. Commander Vethkai, who had ordered the orbital bombardment, was found guilty of crimes against sentient life. His execution was broadcast live. So were the executions of every officer who had followed his orders. Counselor Drekmar, who had planned and authorized the entire operation, was not executed. His punishment was considered worse. He was forced to spend the rest of his life on Elysium Prime. Human colonists were returning to the scarred world, rebuilding their towns and replanting their fields. Drekmar was made to walk among them every day, wearing a simple translator that allowed everyone to know exactly who he was. He was not harmed. He was not imprisoned. He was simply made to see, every single day, the faces of those whose parents and grandparents and children he had ordered killed. He lived in a small house near the main memorial, where 3.8 million names were carved around an eternal flame. He was made to learn every name. 20 years after the war, Ambassador Yelentai attended a ceremony at the Concord Assembly. She was old now. Her scales faded to silver, but her mind was still sharp. The occasion was the formal reintegration of Zorith space into the galactic community. Human occupation forces had finally withdrawn, leaving behind a demilitarized civilization focused on trade and cultural development. The Zorith were allowed to maintain small defensive forces, but their weapons were limited and their ships were monitored. "They will recover eventually," Elder Morveth said, standing beside her. He was impossibly ancient now, over 900 years old, but he had insisted on attending this ceremony. In 1,000 years, perhaps 2,000, they might become powerful again. "And then?" Yelentai asked. "Then they will remember." Every Zorith child learns the history of the Elysium War now. They learn what their ancestors did, and what happened because of it. They will remember for a very long time. Across the assembly chamber, human diplomats mingled with representatives of 100 species. They smiled and laughed and discussed trade agreements and cultural exchanges. They looked peaceful, civilized, harmless. Yelentai watched the younger species interacting with the humans. Some still seemed nervous, keeping a careful distance, but others were already beginning to forget, already starting to see humans as just another trading partner, just another civilization in the vast galactic community. "The young ones will stop fearing them eventually," she observed. "Perhaps," Elder Morveth replied. "But the humans will not change. They will continue to be patient. They will continue to build their universities and tend their gardens and raise their children in peace. They will seal their weapons and let their war minds sleep." He turned to face her, his ancient eyes burning with hard-won wisdom. "But they will never forget how to wake them. And anyone who threatens their children will discover that 300 years, or 3,000 years, of peace means nothing at all." Far away, on the rebuilt world of Elysium Prime, a new generation was growing up in the shadow of the memorial. Children played in the golden fields where their great-grandparents had died. They attended schools named after teachers who had shielded students with their own bodies. They grew up knowing exactly what their ancestors had suffered, and exactly what humanity had done in response. On the anniversary of the massacre, the entire planet fell silent. Ships in orbit cut their engines and drifted. Farmers stopped their machines and stood in their fields. Children paused their games and bowed their heads. For 1 hour, across all of Elysium Prime, there was only silence and memory. Then life continued. The children went back to playing. The farmers returned to their work. Ships resumed their courses and the world moved on, as it always did, as it always would. But carved into the great memorial, below the 3.8 million names and above the eternal flame, were words that would never be forgotten. Every visitor read them. Every species that came to pay respects learned their meaning. Every generation that grew up on that world carried them in their hearts. We came in peace. We left in peace. Between those moments, we were something else entirely. Pray you never meet us there again. The Concord Alliance endured for 10,000 more years. Species rose and fell. Empires expanded and collapsed. Wars were fought and treaties were signed, but no one ever attacked a human colony again. The war gods slept in their vaults, dreaming of battles they hoped would never come. The war minds drifted in electronic slumber, their terrible calculations idle. The sleeper fleets waited in the darkness between worlds, patient and ready. Humanity returned to being traders, artists, diplomats. They built beautiful things and shared them freely. They welcomed strangers and offered friendship to all who sought it. And the galaxy remembered, not what humans had done, but what they could do. If anyone was ever foolish enough to wake the sleeping gods again, some lessons, once learned, are never forgotten. This was one of them.